Oodalali and welcome. My name is DJ, aka for the Fangorn, and I am back with part 4 of my series going over budget singles for Disney Lorcana. Today we will be discussing the Ruby Ink. As for every other video, each card featured will follow the parameters I have set, which are rares, super rares, and legendaries only, as commons and uncommons already fall into my budget guidelines, which are that each card is worth no more than $5 for a single copy, meaning that you can obtain an entire playset for your deck for $20 maximum at market price at the time of making this video. I will also have the video broken down into its normal two parts, with the first part featuring budget staples, cards that are good in this ink in just about every build that features this ink, or their core pieces to decks that use this ink and are seen very, very often. They're just the stronger cards of the budget realm. Second part will be my budget potentials, cards that may be borderline staples, cards that may fit well into budget themed type of decks that work better on a budget scale. They might not be the most competitive. Cards that I think down the line might go up in value, be worth more as more cards come out and new sets get released. And with that, we are going to begin our video of Ruby budget singles. Okay, to start us off with our budget staples is none other than Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen. She is a super rare character from Floodborn. She is a 6 cost uninkable, 3 strength, 4 willpower, quest for 2. Decent stats. She does shift for 4. She doesn't have the best shift targets right now. She can shift on top of herself, though, if you wanted to. But what we're here for is that power to rule at last ability, that when you play her, each opponent must choose a character of their own and banish them. Now, in Ruby, removal is very heavy. It's a very removal heavy ink. And in any Ruby decks, by the time you are able to play her on turn 6, you should have done a really good job of controlling your opponent's board, limiting him to only a couple of characters, most likely. You play this card, and then your opponent has to pick one of those characters that they've probably played recently, one of their stronger characters, and banish them. Her ability does also get around ward because you are not the one choosing a character, your opponent is. So if they have a really good ward character out, say like a Cogsworth, something like that, and you can't really get around it, get rid of it, if you can clear the rest of their board and leave them with just that, they have to pick that Cogsworth and get rid of it. She is a very strong card. She has been a staple since she came out. She is really good. You can shift her on top of herself the next turn for only 4 and double that effect. If you're playing something like Amethyst with it, you can then use one of those Madam Mims that we talked about in the previous video to bounce both of them back to your hand, and you have access to both of them again. It is a really annoying maneuver my brother likes to use, and it makes me want to punch him. It's really good. It's really strong. You definitely want to get a few copies of this card. Moving along is probably her evil cousin, if you will, Madame Medusa. She has a very similar stats. She's also a super rare from Inklands, 6 cost uninkable as well. She does have 1 more strength, with 4 strength, 4 willpower, but she does quest for only 1 as opposed to 2. But she also has that terrible woman that when you play her, you may banish a chosen opposing character with 3 strength or less, meaning you can target a very good character with her. You can pick the target, unlike Lady Tremaine. She's not as heavy as a quester, but that's okay because this ability takes out a lot of really, really strong characters. You'll notice a lot of really key characters do have that 3 strength, putting them in range of her. She's a very core piece of removal, and you definitely want to get your hands on a playset of her. Moving along, we have another super rare character, this time from Ursula's Return. It is Flynn Rider Frenemy. He is a 2 cost inkable character, 2 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 1. He has the narrow advantage ability that at the start of your turn, if you have a character in play with more strength than each opposing character, you gain 3 lore, meaning that if your character on board at the beginning of your turn has the highest strength of any character on board, that you get to gain 3 lore during your set phase at the beginning of your turn. This card can really force your opponent to stop what they're doing to either get rid of him or play a card they weren't looking to play, just to make sure you don't trigger that on your next turn. He can steal you some lore really early in the game, and that can make all the difference as you get into the control side of decks, and all of a sudden you have that 3 lore you got on turn 3 with him. He's just a very, very strong card. He forces your opponents to play around him, and I cannot recommend it enough. I love him a lot. I've been using him since he came out. Moving on is one of my favorite Disney characters, Mulan, Elite Archer. She is a legendary character from that Ursula Return set. She is a 6 cost inkable, 2 strength, 6 willpower, quest for 2. I did debate putting her into the staple section, but I think she's prevalent enough and strong enough and will always be a good card to you want to put in your decks. So I think she belongs here. She does shift on 5, and we're hoping to be able to shift her because she has the straight shooter ability that when you play her, if you did shift her in, she gets +3 strength that turn. Also, she has triple shot that during your turn, whenever she deals damage to a character in a challenge, you deal the same amount of damage to up to 2 other characters. So ideally, you do want to shift her in because you can attack with her right away, challenge with her right away. When you shift, she gets that strength boost of 5, meaning that when you do challenge into something and hit it with her, you're dealing 5 damage not only to that character, but up to 2 other targets of that you want to put 5 damage on. She's a really good way to kind of come down and clear a board if the board's got out of control for you. That effect can be repeated as long as she's alive in challenges. It won't hit for the 5 like it did when you initially shifted her in. But being able to spread 2 damage across 3 characters is always nice. She also quests for 2, so if you clear your opponent's board and have a way to kind of keep it clear, she then becomes an aggressive quester. She's just a really cool card, a really fun card to play. Up next is Goofy, another super favorite. This one is foil. I did get foils of these because I just love Goofy so much, and I thought this was such a cool card. The foil version is not budget friendly. The non-foil is. It is a 4 cost rare character. It is inkable, also from Ursula's Return. It has 2 strength, 4 willpower, and quest for 1. He does have rush, meaning that when you play him, you can challenge that turn with him. And he has super peanut powers that whenever he challenges another character, you gain 2 lore. So you don't even have to banish the character. You just have to challenge with this Goofy, and you gain the 2 lore. Being able with the rush, it's a great pairing because you can suddenly grab 2 lore your opponent wasn't expecting. He can close out some games or push you closer to that finish line himself. It, Ruby has also a lot of ways to like ready characters, so you could potentially challenge with him multiple times that same turn you play him and gain 4, maybe 6 lore depending how crazy it gets. He's just a very, very good card. I love him a lot. He tends to catch people off guard because he's not always in Ruby decks, but especially for budget conscious deck for Ruby, he is going to be a staple. And moving on to the final card in this section is Sisu Emboldened Warrior. She is a 3 cost inkable rare character again from Ursula's Return. She has 1 strength, 4 willpower, quests for 2. Not the greatest stat line on paper. Questing for 2 is always nice, but she has Surge of Power, where she gets +1 strength for each card in your opponent's hand. Now, your opponents, barring some kind of very unique build, they're always going to be wanting to draw cards. If you're able to get her out on turn 3, they probably still have a decent sized hand, regardless of drawing or not. She can quickly become a very strong card. Your opponent, like I said, wants to maintain a hand, so she will always have a good chance of having high strength. That 4 willpower makes her really tricky to get rid of, as that's a pretty high number. 4 is a really important number in this game. Is once they get to 4 strength, 4 willpower, it really kind of makes a card a lot harder to deal with. She is just a very good card, a very staple card. She's seen in just about every Ruby deck, at least as a couple copies of, and I do think she is here for the long haul. Now we are going to be talking about budget potential cards. I'm going to start this off with a personal choice of mine. It is Aladdin Heroic Outlaw. And like that Super Goof, I did foil him out because this card is the reason I started playing Disney Lorcana. Aladdin's my favorite Disney movie of all time. And so when I saw him featured in the starter deck, I was super excited and it really got me interested in the game more than I already was as a lover of Disney and TCGs. Now, this one's also foil, but I do believe the foil version is pretty cheap. It still falls into the budget category, but you can get the non-foil for really, really cheap. All right, to move on to the card itself, it is a super rare from the first chapter, 7 cost inkable, 5 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 2. He does shift on 5. There are a couple decent Aladdins for shifting, so that's nice. But what we love here is the daring exploit ability that during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore and your opponent loses 2 lore. So if you are able to shift him out, catch your opponent off guard, and challenge into something and banish it right away, it's a 4 lore swing, which is huge, especially at that point in the game. If you're at turn 5 or 6, that could be really significant. It always feels good to do that. That 5 strength means he can banish a lot of things. The 5 willpower means he's more likely to stick around, and your opponent's probably going to have to deal with that on their turn unless they want to keep that possible 4 lore swing option open to you. I think it's a really fun card. He hasn't really seen a ton of play in recent, but I do think there is a day where he could come in. And in budget decks, I do love him a lot. He's really cheap and he's really strong. Moving on is arguably the face of the game. It is Mickey Mouse, Brave Little Tailor. I am just a big fan of evasives in general. There's a reason he's in the potential section. You don't really see him in play a lot, but he is a legendary from the first chapter. He is an 8 cost inkable, 5 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 4. Now, questing for 4 as an evasive is already very awesome, very sweet. 5 and 5 is a great stat line, makes him harder to remove. He is very expensive, but at least he's inkable, so it does give you a little flexibility. I've built a number of evasive decks, theme decks with him involved. He's usually just a one, maybe two of because of that high cost. But if you play the long game, the game drags on, and you draw him late, he can really steal games for you, as it's really hard to remove him. I do think he has a lot of potential, and he's just a lot of fun to play. On to our next character. It is Donald Duck, not again. I like this character a lot. He is a legendary Floodborn character, 5 cost inkable, 1 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 1. Again, has evasive. Evasive is a ruby trait as well as emerald. Well, what I really like about him is his Fooey ability that states that when each damage that he has on him, he gets +1 lore pip on him, and with that 5 willpower, there is the potential for him to have 4 damage on him, meaning he could quest up to 5. Your opponent's going to want to get rid of him immediately. He might not stick around very long, but Ruby also has a lot of cards that either deal damage to your own characters, that give you benefits from having damaged characters in play. He fits right into that theme. I like playing with him. I had him in a deck early on when I first started playing the game, and he was pretty useful. A lot of people don't really see him coming if you tech him into a deck. He's definitely one that's super fun at the kitchen table. Up next is the other legendary from Floodborn. It is Scar, Vicious Cheater. He is a 7 cost uninkable legendary character from Floodborn, 6 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 2. He also has Rush, meaning when you play him, he can challenge right away. And he has Daddy isn't here to save you. That during your turn, whenever he banishes another character in a challenge, you can ready him. He can't quest after that, which is fine because on his first turn, anyway, when you play him with that rush, he can't quest that turn. He can only challenge. So you could play him on turn 7, and if your opponent has a couple of exerted characters, you could take out multiple as long as he survives with that 5 willpower. It gives him a chance to. He can clear a board for you and then re-ready himself, giving him safe from a challenge. Then he's free to quest for 2 or challenge again and re-ready again your next turn. He's just a really strong card. I like him a lot. I have seen him used very successfully. Moving on, as you've noticed, challenging is very essential to the Ruby Inc. And Shere Khan really thrives in that environment. He is a rare character from Floodborn, 3 costs, inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, quest for 1. But he has Don't Insult My Intelligence, that whenever one of your characters challenges another character, you gain 1 lore, meaning you can just leave him kind of up. He doesn't have ward to protect him, but you usually aren't questing with him. You want him to stay up and then use maybe that Rush Goofy, that Rush Scar, and other challenge happy characters, and you'll gain lore that way as well. So if you had him on board, you played that Scar and take out a couple of things, challenge multiple times, not only are you clearing a board, you're gaining multiple lore. Pair him with Super Goof. You can play him on 3. Super Goof comes out on 4. You're gaining 3 lore from Super Goof's Rush Challenge. He's just a really cool card to build around, a lot of potential in my opinion. I think he could come back into the top tier decks, but he's again one of those that's going to be featured a lot on this channel when we talk about budget decks. Moving on, we have a rare song from Floodborn. This one debatably belongs in the budget staples, but I have it here right now because there's just so many great removal options that I don't know that it's super stapley. But with Ruby enjoying damaged characters, I think it's going to always bounce in and out of decks. It is 2 cost and inkable. Like I said, it's a song. We have Teeth and Ambitions. You deal 2 damage to one of your characters to deal 2 damage to another chosen character. So yes, you have to hit your own character, but we have things like that Donald we talked about a little bit ago. You can put 2 damage on him with this card right away, giving him extra 2 lore pips on him to quest for 2 extra lore that turn. And then you can hit something else with damage of your opponents, either removing it or bringing it into challenge range that you can remove it that way. It's a cool card. It has some cool utility to it. It's one that you're going to see pretty often. Up next is a personal favorite legendary of mine, Hydra Deadly Serpent. It is legendary character from Inklands. 6 cost uninkable, 6 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 2. Now, in the staple section, you already saw 2 6 cost uninkable characters, so that 6 spot can get pretty heavy. That's the reason he does it as staple, but he is a ton of fun to play. He has Watch the Teeth that whenever he is dealt damage, you deal that much damage to chosen opposing character. So, if your opponent wants to challenge him or hit him for something that get rid of him in one go and 5 damage, they're going to have to also have a character on board that you get to choose and give 5 damage to. You could challenge him into stuff, either probably banishing it, and then whatever damage he receives in that challenge, you can then dish out to a secondary character. You play Teeth and Ambitions that we just talked about on him. You deal 2 damage to him, 2 damage to the opponent, and then his ability triggers as well, and that's another 2 damage. So it's just a really fun card. I really enjoy playing it. It's definitely one that gives your opponents headaches when they see it. But as you saw, we had 2 other preferable forms of removal at that same exact ink cost and the same exact uninkable. So he just doesn't see as much play, but he is super fun to build around and play with. Up next is another favorite of mine. It is a super rare character from the Inklands, Prince Eric Expert Helmsman. He's a 4 cost uninkable, 2 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 2. He has surprise maneuver that whenever he is banished, you may banish chosen character, meaning that if your opponent gets rid of him because he quests for 2, you get to pick something else to get rid of theirs. You could challenge him into something and either take that out and then pick another thing to take out with it as he's banished, or you just challenge into it knowing he's not going to win that challenge or survive it. Their character will. You could then pick that character to banish as well. He's just a fun piece. He's really good in any kind of aggro style Ruby build because he comes down at 4, he quests for 2, and then offers some removal. Up next, we are talking about an item, Maui's Fishhook. There are a ton of Mauis that see play in Ruby. None of them are budget at the moment, but with Maui's Fishhook, they can pop off in the right build. It is a rare item from Inkland's 3 cost inkable. It has its Maui time that if you have a Maui in play, you can use its shapeshift ability for free. Now, what shapeshift does is you typically have to exert it and pay 2 ink and pick one of 2 effects. You can either give a character of yours evasive until the start of your next turn, or a character gets +3 strength for this turn. Being able to use it for free with a Maui on board feels really, really good. It still feels good for 2 ink. It's really not that high of a cost. And then the evasive until your next turn is always nice. So you can give something maybe like that rush scar we talked about, or the Hydra. You can make it evasive so that your opponent can't challenge it as easily until your next turn, protecting it. You can protect some kind of weaker character if you have it. Maybe that Flynn Rider. You can make it evasive, to making it harder for them to challenge if you decide to turn it sideways. But then the +3 strength is always nice too because you could just beef something up pretty quickly and take out a lot of things. It's a cool item. It's a fun item to play, and Maui's always in a Ruby deck, usually one form or the other. So there is a good chance you'll be able to use this ability for free. Up next is our first location of the video. It is RLS Legacy Solar Galleon. It is a 4 cost uninkable location, 3 cost to move a character there. It does have 8 willpower, which is nice, and it also gets you 2 lore on your set phase. It has this is our ship that any character there gains evasive. I'm a big fan of evasive, so obviously I'm going to talk about this. And then it also has Heave Together now that if you already have a character there, it costs 2 less to move another character there. So initially you're going to be paying that 3 cost for the first character you move, and then assuming they're able to stay there, and there's a good chance with the evasive they can, you can move more characters in there for only 1 ink. This can create a real problem for your opponent trying to get rid of your characters, especially if they're looking to challenge into your characters. It's just a really cool location. Any location that has 8 willpower and gains you 2 lore is one worth looking at. It is uninkable, so sometimes it does feel bad, but it's a really fun card and definitely a really cool build or two around it. And I think it's one worth taking a look at. Up next is another card that kind of bounces in and out of some of the more top tier decks is Lumiere, Fiery Friend. He is a rare character from Ursula's Return, 2 cost inkable, 2 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 1. And it has fervent address ability that all of your other characters get +1 strength. We like strength manipulation. We like challenging in Ruby, so giving everybody a little extra umph to their challenge always feels good. He doesn't give it to himself, but that's fine. He's here to really beef up your other characters. If you get two of them down, they do give each other the strength. So, and then everything gets plus two. It could really multiply and become an issue. He's just a really cool card, really fun way to beef up some of your characters, especially if you're running evasives in Ruby, because evasives typically aren't the best in strength. So this can kind of help them in that weakness. Moving on is one of my personal favorite removal songs in the game is Be King Undisputed. It's not a stable piece, but it definitely is a piece you're going to want to take a look at when you're building budget decks. It is a rare song from Ursula's Return, 4 costs uninkable, and it has the same effect as that Lady Tremaine we talked about in the beginning of the video that your opponent chooses a card to get rid of. So it's another way to get around ward if you can keep their board empty and leave just the ward character up, or they have a more valuable character that they care about, they might choose the ward option. But it's always nice to force your opponent to make a decision they don't want to make. I love a song you can play for free. Tremaine does have a body to her. She stays on the board as a character and quest for two, so I see why people lean that way. I personally like to run a little bit of both in a deck. Up next is another location. It is a rare location from Ursula's Return, Snuggly Duckling. It is a 2 cost inkable location. It costs 2 to move a character there. It has 9 willpower, meaning it should stick around for a while. It doesn't gain you passive lore, but it can gain you lore through its routine Ruckus ability. That if you have a character here with 3 strength or more and they challenge another character while they're there, you gain a lore. And if your character happens to have 6 strength or more, you gain 3 lore instead of the 1. Things like that, Maui's Fishhook, Lumiere can definitely bump a card that's on the borderline or nowhere near that 6 strength into that, and then suddenly you are gaining 3 lore with challenging with a stronger card than it should be. This is a cool deck has a cool deck ideas around it. I've seen some fun builds around it. Anytime you can kind of surprise your opponent with extra lore, that feels nice. I don't think it's super consistent, and it's definitely combo heavy, but it is a lot of fun to play, and I think it deserves a mention in this video. That Snuggly Duckling plays well with this next card, Maximus, Team Champion, super rare character from Shimmering Skies. It is a 6 cost inkable, 3 strength, 5 willpower quest for 2. It has royally big rewards that at the end of your turn, if you have a character in play with 5 strength or more, you gain 2 lore. If you have one with 10 strength or more, you gain 5 lore instead. Again, we're seeing big pluses to strength manipulation in Ruby. You can play this on your turn, and your opponent can't really do anything to stop that ability from triggering because they can't do anything during your turn, so you can catch them off guard, especially if you already have a big beefy character on board. Suddenly, there's nothing they can do, and you're gaining a bunch of lore right then and there. It is combo heavy. It is a lot of fun, though. I do have a build with it currently, and I really enjoy playing with. Up next is a card that I think screams potential. I don't really, I might be alone on this one, but I just think Donald Duck Pieslinger here, the legendary character from Shimmering Skies, fits so well into Ruby decks, especially like control decks that start off a little slower. It's a 5 cost inkable, 3 strength, 6 willpower quest for 1. He does shift for 4. There's not really a ton of great Donalds to shift onto, but that's okay. Humble Pie is a decent ability that if you play him using shift, your opponent loses 2 lore. But what I'm here for is Raging Duck, that if your opponent has 10 or more lore, he gets plus 6 strength, immediately making him a 9/6 for 5 if you play him later in the game. That is a huge body. He can take out just about any character he wants in a challenge at that point. There's a good chance he's surviving that challenge with the 6 willpower. That 9 puts him right on the borderline of triggering those Maximuses. It puts him over that line for the Snuggly Duckling we talked about. There's definitely fun ways to use this card, and I think he is just being overlooked right now. I think this card is a really cool utility card, a really fun card. I have really enjoyed playing with him, and I think you should grab a couple copies now while he's pretty cheap. And anytime you can get a legendary for cheap, I like it. Up next is the other legendary character from Shimmering Skies. It is Robin Hood Sharpshooter. He is a 4 cost uninkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower, quest for 2. He has the My Greatest Performance ability that whenever he quests, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, you may reveal an action cost that is 6 or less ink to play and play it for free. You discard the rest. There have been some really fun builds with this card. It's not the most consistent card. It's really a shot in the dark with him. But he can really catch your opponent off guard, playing an action for free, especially if the cost of 5 or 6 cost one feels really, really good. It can really change a game around. I've seen them in Ruby Steel builds where they'll use that ability, pull a whole new world, play it for free. It has a lot of fun uses to it. It can feel bad sending cards to your discard sometimes, especially if you don't hit an action that you can play. You just discarded 4 cards for nothing, but at least he's questing for 2. You definitely need to keep in mind with that ability around him if you're building a deck featuring him. But there have been some pretty fun builds with him, and I think it's definitely worth talking about. Up next is another Shimmering Skies character. It is a rare character. It is Gaston Pure Paragon. 9 cost, uninkable, 10 strength, 6 willpower, quest for 2. Those stats alone are triggering Maximus, they're triggering Snuggly Duckling. So if you can get a Maximus on board and he sticks around, you play this, their next turn you're gaining that huge lore swing. He also has rush, so dropping a 10 strength rush character, you're pretty much demolishing whatever you want that's available to be challenged. And the best part about him is a man among men ability that for each damaged character you have in play, you pay 2 less ink to play him. Now, you've noticed that Ruby does enjoy having damaged characters. You're challenging a lot, so you probably have damaged characters. It is really, really easy to get him out, especially at the 2 ink discount per damaged character for 5 ink, 3 ink. I've played him for free before in the past when you have a big board. He's not that hard to get out. He does feel bad a lot of the time, so you're probably not running more than 2 of him in the deck, but it's a really fun card. And then up next is a card that combos well with a location we talked about back in our Amber video. It is Sugar Rush Speedway starting line, pairs with the finish line. Makes sense. It is a 1 cost uninkable location. It is 0 cost to move character there, meaning you can move characters there for absolutely free. It has 5 willpower, making it a little bit sticky too for a 1 cost location. But what we're here for is the on your marks ability that once per turn you may exert a chosen character here and deal 1 damage to them and then move them to any other location for free. So a character does have to be dry to use that ability because you cannot exert it the turn you play it for this ability because it's acting as though the character has that ability attached to it. But we have things like the RLS Legacy that costs 3 initially to move something. Now you just put a damage on something, move it there, and it's got evasive, keeping it more safe. And with the finish line that we talked about in Amber, you're able to move because you have to move a character from a location to that location to trigger that 3 card draw, 3 gain of lore. This clearly fits in with it. You can put a character here, move it over there, and then bam, just like that, 3 lore, 3 cards, 1 damage. It's a really good trade off, and it's a combo heavy deck, but it's definitely a card I would try and grab a playset of. Up next, we're moving into Azurite Sea. It is Mickey Mouse Pirate Captain, a super rare character, 5 cost, inkable, 4 strength, 4 willpower, quest for 2. He does shift for 3. There are some good Mickeys to shift on, so there is a good chance you could use that shift. But he also has Mariner's Might, that whenever he quests, chosen pirate gets +2 strength and gains, takes no damage from a challenge this turn. So if he quests for 2, you can then, if you have any other pirate character on board, not only are they getting a strength boost, they're also basically immune from taking damage in a challenge that turn. So they are free to challenge into things that they normally wouldn't be able to survive a challenge from and survive. It's just a really cool card. I've seen it used well. I've got a good buddy who loves this card and is adamant that it's really great. And I have seen it in action, and I do think it deserves a little bit of a highlight. Moving on is one that I think people are sleeping on just a little bit. It is Minnie Mouse Pirate Lookout from Azurite Sea. She is a super rare 3 cost uninkable, 3 strength, 2 willpower, quest for 1. She has Land Ho, which is during your turn, whenever you put a card into your inkwell, you can return a location card from discard to your hand, meaning that if your opponent got rid of a location card that you're built your deck around or is really essential to you or does a lot of work for you, and they feel good about it, you can play her ink in your normal play style that you want to do every turn anyway, and put that back in your hand so that you can replay it. We like any kind of recursion, getting cards back from the discard, and especially in budget. Anytime we could put a card in our hand feels good, especially when we're choosing the card. I think she could put in a lot of work. She could bring back. I've seen her in Ruby Amber builds with those Sugar Rush Speedway starting and finish lines, and then you're bringing back that powerful finish line and playing it again, and then you could pop off the starting line. It's just there's some fun combos with her, and she is a ton of fun to play. Up next is another card we love for location decks. It is Moana Kakamora Leader. She is a rare character, again from Azurite Sea. 7 cost inkable, 6 strength, willpower of 5, quest for 1. She shifts for 5. We don't really have a ton of Moanas that are great for shifting, but that's okay because she has gathering forces that when you play her, you may move any number of your characters to the same location for free. Meaning you can move a bunch of characters into that starting line, into the RLS Legacy. any other location that you have that you might want characters in. And Ruby Amethyst, maybe that's Queen's Castle or the library. There's just a lot of fun ways to use this. And if you have a few characters on board, you could make a huge lore swing because it does count for herself as well. I don't know if you're running more than two or three of her in a deck. Being inkable is nice because it gives you a little flexibility if you draw her at the wrong time or you have her early in the game. But there's anytime we can sneak in a bunch of unexpected lore, it feels really nice. And to end this video, we are talking about yet another 6 cost uninkable character in this ink. That's clearly a very busy, very heavy slot, so it's hard to find room for all of them. But I think this goofy flying goop is worth talking about. He's a rare character from Azurite Sea. He's got 5 strength, 5 willpower, quest for 1. He's got rush. That means he can come in right away and challenge. And he has evasive, meaning he can get rid of some of those really pesky evasives that are hard to deal with otherwise, catch your opponent off guard, and most likely survive because usually evasives aren't the beefiest of characters. This guy's got a pretty solid line as for strength and willpower for an evasive, and the rush is nice because he can pretty much take out any other evasive your opponent plays and live, and he's more likely to stay on the board being evasive. I think he's a really cool card, a lot of fun to play with. And that's going to do it for my video on Ruby Budget Singles from the first chapter through Azurite Sea. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking it out. If this is the type of content you enjoy and you like seeing, if you are on the casual budget side of Lorcana and want some more tips and cards to look out for, please give me a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. You can find me over on X as well, where I am very active under the same name, Ferda Fangorn. The next video coming out will be the Sapphire Ink. And with that, be love, be you, and God bless.